Nathan Barry. I don't appreciate you keeping me waiting while you're streaming a video game.
Oh, good job censoring yourself. That's so important that we keep this stream age appropriate.
I'm pretty sure we check the not family friendly box on every episode.
I think we do. I just want everyone to know I was not, in fact, the imposter in Among Us.
No one believes you.
No one ever believes me. Oh man, everyone, welcome to episode 90. We've been doing this a little while now. Barrett, how you doing? Red, yellow, green.
Ooh, I am squarely yellow. My father-in-law is this moment, hopefully coming out of surgery on his back. And so I'm waiting on news from that. It's always a little nerve-wracking until you get the news that everything went well according to plan. So I took today as a sick day to support the family, but I'm podcasting in the middle of it, which is a nice little distraction for a little while.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm green. Let's see. Things going on. Well, I've been a little bit sick the last week and a half. And so I was like, I don't know, is it COVID or is it not? Got a COVID test yesterday. It's totally not COVID. So that's good.
Things to be thankful for.
Yes, exactly. That was interesting. They got results back. It was one of those drive-through tests, but I got results. They just said park there. And then 30 minutes later, they came back and said, you don't have COVID. So anyway, they have their systems down to a science. That was interesting. Let's see other things. Man, it's been a good week at ConvertKit.
Yes, it has.
Revenue side, I think we've been over 2,500 in net new revenue every day this week, which is pretty wild. It's also the end of our build cycles. And so we've just been releasing all the stuff. We are quiet for a little while. And then we're like, look at all this crazy stuff we built. And people are like, wow, that's amazing. And then we're quiet again for 5 weeks. And then we show up. But it's one of those fun times that we've got a lot to release. We also hired a VP of product.
We did indeed.
Can't talk about who it is yet or anything like that.
Cannot.
But that was just a huge thing. And it's funny when you have these things on your list, once that was done, and I mean, there's still so much work to be done. But once that was checked off my list, I felt all of this creative energy towards other things. I wrote 3,000 words on my book proposal and sample content. Or scheduled a bunch of other things I've been needing to get to. So it was just funny how it was this floodgates open. It's and now look at all the stuff I can do.
Yeah.
So that's been good. So anyway, probably yellow, green. It's also pouring rain here.
We've had a lot of that today too. Yeah. It's been a very dreary Friday.
Yeah. Let's see. First, we should talk about making creative, I was going to say poor choices. I'm going to go with creative choices last minute on impulse. Is it impulse? Is it peer pressure from the team? You started a paid newsletter.
I did indeed. One of the things we launched this week was the ability to process recurring payments or a subscription product inside of ConvertKit Commerce. And when we launched Commerce in general, that was the spark for me to finally update all of my material on how to go about finding a job successfully. And I turned that into the most meaningful job of your career workshop. That went really well. I don't remember how many people bought it. Enough people that it was worth it. And I did a live version and then a self-paced version. And so this time, the peer pressure was towards creating something to use the subscription product in ConvertKit Commerce. So I made a paid newsletter. It was on a whim, but also writing is my
it's been a long time coming.
Yes, I want to be writing. I need to be writing. It helps my creative juices flow, but it also just keeps both you and I connected to the product and the actual experience of using it. And so for this very small period of time, I think I'm leading in number of subscription payments being processed. But yeah, I launched it. I'm calling it Career Capital, which I thought was actually, I went back through all my old writing on Career Capital or on just meaningful careers and looked for a phrase that I had already used before. And that was my method for naming it. And that one stuck. And it feels like exactly what I'm trying to do is like, what are those direct, hard conversations that you would normally have with a mentee or someone you care deeply about how to make the most of their career? And let's just put that in email form so I can do that for as many people as possible. So first issue went out today, went out to 28 subscribers. I gained one more right afterwards. So I'm at 145. It's $5 a month, which is, like nothing basically. And so I'm at $145 a month, which feels pretty good for like tweets and an email. And my next goal is 200 paying subscribers. Ultimately, if I could get into the like 2,000 to 2,500 range, it would feel like a really valuable way to have an impact on a bunch of people and make a nice, like, I could channel that into, I don't know, a real estate property or something like that. That would be really fun. So anyways, that's the long-term goal.
That gets into some of those, like this side project could turn, when it turns into 1,000 a month in revenue, 2,000 a month, somewhere in there, then you're like, wait, that's starting to look like most of a mortgage payment on, a vacation property or an investment property or something like that. So that's kind of, someone asked a couple episodes ago about taking like internet money and turning it into real world money. And that's kind of the fun things that become available. Another way that I've loved when people think about it is like removing individual payments. So at one point you're like, okay, I'm just trying to get going and I'm trying to replace, maybe if we're starting really small, if I get 3 subscribers, it replaces my Netflix bill.
Right.
Then you're moving up, you're like, okay, now it's my entire internet bill.
Yeah, exactly.
Now it's my car payment, and it kind of moves up. And it's a really fun way to think about it because you can get in this trap otherwise of like, oh, it's $100 a month, or I've been like, it's not, I need 5,000 or 8,000 a month to live. And so it doesn't feel as substantial, but that's a way that you can make it really, really tactical and tangible.
Yeah, exactly. Our next 2 like personal financial goals are like a full 6 months of expenses. We have like more of like a true emergency fund where you'd cut back on everything kind of thing. I want to have like a full coverage of 6 months of all expenses. And then I want to pay off our car. We only have one car and go ahead and pay that off. And then, because to your point, like that's not just taking care of the monthly payment, that's actually eliminating it, which creates even more. This is this idea that we talked about the other week. I don't remember when it was, of compounding financial wins.
Right.
Because that's how you end up building long-term independence and wealth. Is you don't just make the money, you then funnel it into eliminating liabilities in other areas. And now that creates even more free cash flow that you can use to invest or do other things with. So,
yeah. And that's another thing. Let's say someone's not, if I've seen a lot of people do this, if they have debt to pay down, like whether it be a car or student loans or something like that, then they're mapping like, okay, my side hustle is going to go towards this other thing. Actually, like our friend and former coworker, Matt Regland, he talked about that quite a bit of a lot of his side hustle stuff was to pay off student loans and other debt.
Right.
And then once he cleared that, he had all this momentum and it turned into the whole thing. And now he's a full-time creator. And I think that can be great. But let's say that like, I don't know, buying individual stocks on Robinhood is like your little fun pastime. And so you're like, okay, I don't want to touch this other money, but I'm going to start a side hustle and put that money into, buying my, Tesla and AMD and other stock that you think is like Shopify and other ones that you want to follow. And then that compounds further, right? Because you're taking a return here that's growing and you're putting it into something else that's growing.
Right. Exactly. So anyways, it's fun. I'm excited. I'll kind of do some like work in public updates. I did one on Twitter today just to kind of show like exactly how much promo I did and what that resulted in. The hard part will actually be doing free content now to actually grow my wider audience, but that's for another day. Yeah. It actually gets to the first question though.
Let's do it.
From Noah. Noah asked, Barrett, what's it like deciding to hop back on the content treadmill with the paid newsletter? Where do I draw my inspiration? And then just personal note on getting back to him on an email. Okay, what's it like to get back on the content treadmill? You're on the content treadmill now too, doing a newsletter every week.
21 weeks in a row. Not to
it's
brag,
pretty solid. Pretty solid. You got 20 weeks on me. Okay, first things first is While it is a paid weekly newsletter, I am doing it a little bit differently than maybe you would see from a lot of the people who have started paid newsletters recently, and that I'm making it an evergreen newsletter. And so my goal will be to write every issue in an evergreen way or a timeless way, where the advice applies regardless of when you get it. And so when you subscribe to Career Capital, you'll go into an automation in ConvertKit that sends you a welcome email. It has 2 questions for you to respond to, and then it drops you into a Friday cadence where you start at issue 1. And so for each person, it's personalized to them in terms of timing. And then over time, I might be able to personalize some of the content, and just like we can use things like content snippets where I could put in a recent event type thing in whatever email they're getting this week. And so things like that. But I'll also I'm going to try and work out a way to automate a person being able to say, I want to go to the latest issues. I don't want to read all the back catalog in order. I want to actually just get the latest stuff you're writing. And then that would just skip them all the way ahead. So it is a content treadmill. However, I'm trying to build it in a way that it will pay off over time. So I'm not having to like always keep up. On the other hand, people paying me is a good accountability mechanism, because I can always excuse not writing for focus at ConvertKit. And there is value to focus, but I certainly have time to write what amounts to an article a week, like without a doubt. And so this will just be a good accountability mechanism for me to actually get it done, because people are counting on it because they're paying me for it.
Well, okay. So there's a couple things I really like about this. One is you're treating it like, if there's 2 ways to look at this. One is the hamster wheel. Right now you're on this content hamster wheel, and you have to show up every single week. And we kind of talked about the downsides of that. But what I think you've done is you've taken that and turned it into a flywheel and said, okay, yes, I do have to show up consistently. But as I do that, I am going to make it be something that is a system that's generating content, generating assets that work for me going forward. And so that's a very different thing than, like, especially these daily newsletters or something like that, where you're having, like, it will define your life. And this is something where you could, at some point down the road, if you want to take a week off, I bet people would totally give you, Christmas off or something, because there's this whole back catalog that you've built up of content for them to consume. And maybe only the most like dedicated people who have been there from the very beginning would even notice that you took Christmas off,
right?
Because they have all of this catching up. And so for those people, you might be able to say like, hey, no newsletter this week, but we're doing a behind the scenes Q&A, or we're doing something else that's going to be easy for me to show up with. And then the other thing is, this newsletter that you're producing, like, all that content can be repurposed into something else as well.
Right. Yeah, so. Exactly. He also asked, where do we each get our inspiration from? I tweeted earlier that 2 things inspire more writing ideas: reading and writing. And I said it was trite but true, and it is trite but true. It doesn't come from anywhere else. Like, when I read, I get ideas. When I write, it's like a mind map opens up. So I wrote in an issue yesterday. My first issue was about talent company fit. It was kind of like a play on the idea of product market fit, that when you fit with where you work, that opens up all of this room for you to grow. Not going to get into more of it because you have to pay me for that. But that sparked a bunch of thoughts. Like, for example, drawing a graph that shows revenue growth and scale of a team with number of generalists and number of specialists on a team over time, and how to optimize for being a generalist versus a specialist, depending on what kind of company you want to go to work for. Like, that's a cool concept. And if I hadn't written yesterday, that concept would not be in my brain right now. And so, like, this afternoon, assuming all is well in surgery land, I'm going to go write the next one because I'm inspired, and like, I already have the idea, and I might as well just carry that forward. But I have a list now of, just off of writing yesterday, I think 8 or 10 more ideas came out of that one writing session. And so what I did was, instead of trying to make it super expansive, I just said, okay, focus. 1 point, 1 email, 1 point. Next week, make the next point. My goal is to write 500 to 1,000 words in an email, and then 3 links to things that you can read to deep dive on the topic. So anyways, writing, and then reading is the other. In normal times, I would say things like our mastermind retreats, spending time with really high quality thinkers would be a third way. It's just a little bit harder right now. Although we do have our monthly kind of what I'm calling salons that we've been doing lately too.
Yeah, that makes sense. We've got a few more questions, but before we move on from newsletters, I want to touch on the pricing for a minute, because you started with $5 a month. And so I'd love for you to share some of that, because, and I believe partially it's because you have other goals than just the money from it. But like, share a little bit on why you chose $5.
Okay. $5 is what? A good cup of coffee in Portland, or a normal cup of coffee in Portland, which is a good cup of coffee everywhere else. I'm so pretentious. Okay. $5 is a throwaway purchase. And you don't just get one thing, you get 4 things every month, or 4.5, I guess, on average. So I think it's a no-brainer. And I always wanted to deliver 10x value for anything I charge for. It's really easy to do that at $5 a month. I actually think $5 an issue would be really easy to deliver that amount of value for. I legitimately think, I made this call out in the email I sent to my audience, that if someone subscribes to this and acts on what I tell them to do over a period of 18 to 24 months, I bet they should be able to increase their earnings by 30 to 75%, somewhere in there. Yeah. And I don't feel hesitant, like saying, I can't promise it obviously, but I don't feel hesitant saying that. And okay, so the first thing is $5, throwaway purchase. It's easy for anyone. It's accessible. It's like, I can't spend time with you that you might want with me, but I can send you a really high quality email that's a form of mentorship. The second piece is, I think it kind of forces me to also focus on volume. And as a person, I can get in this mode of like, people just don't understand the value I provide. Like, the people who get it, pay attention, but this will actually make me think about, how do I get more? And I like that. However, I also think there's a little piece of me that's like, okay, make sure you actually want to maintain this before you charge people what it's really worth.
Right.
And so I could totally see there being either another tier, or like even increasing the price in general in the future, once I've proven that I can do it for 20 weeks in a row or something like that.
So one thing that makes me think of is taking like mental note of what your fears or roadblocks are going to be. So yours is like, that you might go to is, no, I've always been the person who delivers really high quality to a small number of people. Coaching, anything that's tailored to that individual. I'm not a volume kind of person. And so then, exactly what you're saying, charging $5 means, for it to be meaningful, you have to get 200, 500, 1,000. Like, we have to move into substantial numbers of people. And so it forces you to change this mindset and be like, okay, I have to step out of my comfort zone into this other, into this scale where a lot of our friends play. Now, someone else might be in the other camp and they might be like, I'm going to charge $5, and then realize that it's because they're scared to charge what they're worth. And that's their roadblock.
Yeah.
And in that case, you and I would be all over that and be like, no. You have to charge 10. Okay, what makes you really uncomfortable? $20 a month, because you need to be confident that's the level of value that you're delivering, and that you're creating content that's worth that much, because that's the roadblock.
Right.
Charging what you're worth, 100% not the roadblock, like mental barrier that you have.
No worries about that.
And so it's just interesting how you can tailor the product that you're selling to, to your own, like mental obstacles that you need to overcome.
Right. Exactly.
All right, let's do some questions.
Let's see. Next, Chris asked in the chat, Chris Spo or Spow, could you describe the process for planning out your key goals, objectives, and KPIs, I assume, or KPRs for 2021 at ConvertKit, and how your current process differs from the plans you made back in the creator days? I mean, the first thing that comes to mind in terms of back in the creator days, I think I've written a post on planning your year. It might've been for Fizzle though. I'll go track that down. But you don't have to worry about anyone else. You're not coordinating across, like, we're coordinating across 60 people plus 100 contractors or something like that. And so there's just a lot more complexity to all of the pieces that need to happen. When you're a creator, it's like you have however many hours you're dedicating to your work every week, and that's all you can do. And so you've got to be just like this much focused on what can your plans represent. And so by nature of that, they are more focused, less breadth, and it's limited to only what you want to and can do that year. For the company, it's just there's more moving parts and we have more factors to consider, and what are we aiming for than just what do you and I want. Yeah, that's one of the biggest ways it's different.
Yeah, I think the big thing of how we go about it is we definitely spend a lot of time meeting together and planning it out, but we identify what are the 2 or 3 biggest things that we're trying to move the needle on. Then we try to put numbers to those. So instead of like, okay, we want to grow commerce, then it's like, well, okay, but be specific. You can think of it as there's this phrase of like, make it falsifiable. Like basically prove whether or not this is going to happen. If you made a prediction and said e-commerce will be bigger in the future, it's like, well, okay, sure. But if you could say, global spending on e-commerce is going to increase from this percentage of GDP to that percentage of GDP in 5 years, then you can come back and say whether I was right or not. Mm-hmm. And so, whether it's individual goals or company goals, you have to make them falsifiable. So can you know if they were achieved? And then the last step, or the last major step that we'd go to, is set counterbalancing goals. So if we're going to hit revenue to this level, then we would have a counterbalancing goal of we're also going to get number of paying customers to this, because we're trying to actually focus on, say the customer's paying us $29 to a couple $1,000 a month. Because if you're just focused on revenue, then we would go this other direction and say like, we're going to go get a bunch of $5,000 or $10,000 a month enterprise accounts, which is antithetical to how we want to build the business.
Right.
And so as a creator, you might say, here's my revenue goal. And then if you had a number of customers or a amount that is from your services business versus your products business, basically a counterbalancing goal that expresses how you want to achieve it.
Yep. We are a little bit transitioning this year. We've had kind of a like intuitive planning process, and we're enlisting the help of our coaches to, they start from more of what's called a balanced scorecard approach, which is a methodology people learn in MBA programs. And we're going to do a derivative of that this year. So you basically start with financial targets, you go down to strategic initiatives, you take those strategic initiatives and think about the team level. What do teams need to do to contribute that? And then you go through resource allocation. Where do you need to spend money? Where do you need to hire people? That kind of thing. So that's the approach we'll take this year. We can let you know how it goes if that helps anyone.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, next question is from Mason. How do you each prioritize your mental health amidst work priorities, family needs, and the outside challenges this year has thrown at us?
It's very challenging. We're very human in this way. In some ways, I think we probably both have both healthy and unhealthy ways of doing this.
Yeah.
One unhealthy way is I channel a bunch of energy into creating stuff. I create newsletters or products or things like that. And it's like a productive way to respond to things that are out of my control, is to say, well, this I can do. And this limits like what I'm spending time and energy on to productive, like asset building ways of going about my life. But the second thing is I try and catch myself early in the cycle of stress, where when I start to feel it in the pit of my stomach, or I'm seeing it show up in my habits day to day, I try and go back to 3 things: sleep, diet, and exercise. And I guess the fourth one that always comes out of that is just quality time with family. Right. But if I'm getting 8 hours of sleep at night, and I'm exercising 3-4 times a week, and I'm generally eating pretty well, which for me looks like no gluten, no dairy, and mostly meat and veggies, which is just kind of what I do normally, that helps. A habit, for example, that I was getting into during the pandemic was like a cocktail 3 or 4 times a week. After work, typically on the nights I wasn't working out, and then like Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And that's fine. Like I don't mind having a drink a night, but what I realized was that it was becoming a thing where it was just the default. And so I realized that was a stress response, and I just cut it off. I said, okay, I'm not going to drink for a month. because that way I can reset and then decide, okay, what nights of the week do I want to have a cocktail or a beer or whatever. So I try and break the habits when they start going bad. And then if I find myself on the other side of like, I got too far in and now I'm like anxious, maybe heading into depression even, I really break everything. I do like a hard reset on all my habits. I default back to getting a lot of sleep. I really get strict on food, and then I go straight to, I got to book therapy appointments and like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I think another thing to add to that, I do a lot of the same things, but is having some checks and balances. And I think we're pretty good at calling each other out sounds too strong. Maybe just like noticing where the other person is at. We both have coaches who do the same thing, who are like, hey, I think you need to take some time. Like a few weeks ago, my coach was like, look, I can just feel the tiredness from the other side of the Zoom call. Like you need to take some time away. And so, I did that, took 3 or 4 days off. And so I think having those people in your life who are noticing that, and then have some of those check-ins for yourself, like people who do journaling, and like, whether it's 5-minute journal or morning pages or something like that, those are often designed to have these check-ins where you're like, oh yeah, no, I'm good. Okay, maybe I'm not great. And then you can dig in and why is that?
Yeah, totally. Next question, just kind of fun, quick one from Chris. He says, will Seth Godin be your guest on episode 101? I don't think so. That's not what this podcast was for. It's like not really a guest show. It's really just our place to share what we know, share trends in the industry, answer y'all's questions. So if I'm being honest, like, I don't know if it's a good use of Seth's time, and I don't know that it adds that much to the show, all things considered. If I were going to ask Seth to join us, it would be for something else, and we did for like the first Craft and Commerce. We asked them to come out, and that was awesome. I'm really glad we did that, but I just don't know that this show is the right venue. Yeah,
that makes sense. So the reason that Chris is asking is because we brought up the fact that Seth has a rule that when someone's like, will you come on my podcast? He says, yes, after you've done 100 episodes, because he wants, so many podcasts, like all creative ventures, start and then, die off when someone's like, okay, it turns out 5 weeks of podcasting is actually harder than I thought, or, whatever else. And so Seth's way of saying is like, I'll make myself available to anyone who's willing to endure and put in the effort to like create consistently. And so that's where the question comes from. And yeah, I think for us, it's about, we have a lot of, famous or internet famous friends, and we don't want to be annoying. If we're going to ask someone for something, it better be really meaningful.
Yeah.
And whether it's someone that
that's the other piece, right? It's like, you can listen to 100 interviews with Seth, probably more, all over the internet. So like a thing that I would do with Seth, for example, is I've had this other podcast in my mind forever. I want to do interviewing people working on really hard society level problems. If I did 100 episodes of that, I would ask Seth to come do a conversation about the education system, because he's written about this, but it's not like his thing, it's not the core of his work, but he has a lot of good thoughts on it. That would be new ground to cover. And that would be something that I could add to his like pantheon of work that's out there. So that's always what I think about is, what does it even make sense? It's like a cool kitschy thing to say Seth Godin's on the show, but did we actually deliver something new from that?
Right.
That's something else.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I would just think about, I think I lost that train of thought. Well, I guess just bringing something new to the world.
Yeah.
All right. So if I'm pitching someone to come onto a show, I mean, the first thing, like anything you can do to tailor the pitch, so it's not like, let's just rehash the same story that you've told over and over again. And so if you instead, you could say, okay, from this thing that you said, I know you care deeply about this topic. Like, I'd like to have you on so we can deep dive on that. Because best as I can tell, there's only this 7 minutes of audio that exists ever of you talking about this. And I've researched it like crazy. An example would be Jason Fried from Basecamp has talked about the same work, habits, software, all this. Like, he's talked about it endlessly. and he has the same talking points as a lot of these people do.
I have a guess in my mind. I'll tell you if I'm right about what you're going to highlight.
Okay. So there's something that Jason is super interested in, and I've only heard him talk about it once, and that is like prairie restoration.
Yes, I knew it.
And he's actually bought a lot of land in the Midwest, and he's working on like with conservationists to like restore this to the original prairies the right way. And so he's, as much as he's gotten obsessed by anything, he's wildly obsessed about this topic. But like everyone's like, hey, Jason, let's talk about why it doesn't have to be crazy at work or, whatever. And he's like, great. Okay. I'm down with that. But I bet if your pitch for any creator was for that thing that they care deeply about and never talk about, and you could come, maybe you pairing them with another expert that they wanted to meet and talk to anyway, or you could come and have done the level of research where you could talk to them as a peer or as, an intellectual peer, then I bet they'd be far more likely to say yes.
Yep, totally. Okay, I think this is our last question for today, unless another one comes in randomly. Damir asks, in the future, do you see ConvertKit offering a native mobile experience, which means an app, for ConvertKit creators with a focused set of easily accessible productivity and or analytics features?
Yeah, that's actually something we've been talking about a lot lately. One thing with a small team is you have to be really careful to not spread yourself thin. And the conversation that we're having right now is what features would we want to add to a mobile app? And then how do we want to go about it, right? Because there's mobile web, or there's, like these cross-platform native, hybrid native experiences like a React Native or something like that. And then there's true native apps for iOS and Android. I was going to say Windows, but that's not really a thing anymore. Windows Phone kind of died. There was a time where you had to build all 3 apps, but not really anymore. So I guess it's just the 2. And then there's all of our silos within the product of like subscribers, broadcasts, automations, reporting. Some of them lend themselves really well to a mobile experience. Others, like automations, could be a little bit more challenging, just based on how it's all drawn and rendered. And so that's a conversation we're having right now of what does it look like, not only to build it once, but also to maintain and build it forever, because you're increasing the footprint of the product. And whenever you're doing that, it's true in SaaS, but it's also just true in life, of being really aware of like, hey, this isn't some random new thing. This is a new responsibility that I'm going to have to, I don't know if it's like having another kid or something where you're like, hey, I'm actually responsible for this forever. It's not just like for a couple of years where it's fun. Right. And so that's the conversation we're having now of like how best to go into that and do it responsibly.
And, there's always the questions of like, okay, convenience makes sense, but what is the actual desire behind it? Like, what are you wanting to do on the go or on a mobile phone or whatever? I picture like being on the subway in New York when we lived there, and someone wanting to go on ConvertKit as a way of productively using that commute time.
Right.
What is a person actually trying to do during that time? Or do they just want to see an update? Or is it more of like a get the endorphins of checking Twitter kind of feeling of seeing how many new subscribers you made or how much money in product sales you did today? Is it, do you actually want to be like writing a full email or designing a full email? That's a whole other thing, right? Basic writing, that's probably doable. Designing a complex email, that's probably really difficult on a mobile device, or at least on a phone sized device. In the same way that like InDesign or something like that would be challenging on a mobile device. It's not what that's for. And so I think we just have to really challenge ourselves to make sure we understand the desires driving the question from a lot of the customer base, and then designing for those things. And then once we design them, then we have to ask, do we want to maintain this? Right. Is this something we can actually commit to in a reasonable way over time? So it's complex. I know people don't want to hear all that, but that's how we think about it.
Yeah, sounds good. Creators?
Most of the creators I'm paying attention to right this second, I've highlighted before, and I don't want to repeat necessarily.
I got one. We'll go with that, and we'll close it out there.
Okay, love it. Creator of the day.
Got a little syncopation there. I like it. Okay. The creator that I want to feature is a ConvertKit customer, and she's pretty incredible. Her name is Bonnie Christine, and she is a fabric designer. And so we actually did a story on her. Issa did a story, so you can check it out on the I Am a Creator podcast or on the blog. But she just has this incredible story of working in a quilting store and then deciding that she wanted to be a fabric designer, and then realizing like, okay, wait, then I have to learn design. Maybe I should go to design school. No, actually, I'm going to teach myself. And anyway, the story just goes on. It's pretty fantastic. She pays her way through learning design, self-taught and just courses that she's buying by selling aprons and tea towels and things like that on Etsy. And there's this line in here somewhere. She realizes that if she made as many aprons a day as she could, it could add up to $40,000 a year. And then she goes through this long journey. But basically what ends up happening is, instead of originally going to design school, she creates all her own curriculum and teaches herself, becomes a successful fabric designer, gets her first contracts, and years later ends up creating her own design curriculum for people to learn Illustrator and go all the way through. And my favorite moment of the whole thing, which you can read the full story, but basically she does a course launch, sells her course, sells $1.5 million worth of this course,
my gosh,
which is 37 years worth of making of aprons. So it's pretty wild. BonnieChristine.com, and then the Creator Stories, or the I Am a Creator podcast. So
I love it. Okie dokie, artichoke. This has been episode 90. Great to be with y'all. Thanks for asking good questions. We will see you on Monday.